It seems like you can't go 2 hours in this country without hearing about a new shooting that has taken someone's life. In fact, an average of 110 people die each day in America due to suicides, homicides, and accidents involving firearms, and another 210 survive but are wounded. That's 40,000 people who die each year at the barrel of a gun, and this is now the leading cause of death for young people in this country. This would imply that American gun laws are an imperfect invention. But how did we get here? The U.S. Constitution states that Americans have the right to a, quote, well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, unquote. There has been much debate about the lengths to which this allows citizens to own guns and what kind of guns, but in the case of District of Columbia versus Heller, a 2008 Supreme Court case, in a 5-4 vote, the Supreme Court found that the United States Constitution protects an individual's right to keep and bear arms, unconnected with service in a militia, for traditionally lawful purposes, such as self-defense within the home, and that the District of Columbia's handgun ban and requirement that lawfully owned rifles and shotguns be unloaded and disassembled or bound by a trigger lock violated this guarantee. It also stated that the right to bear arms is not unlimited and that guns and gun ownership would continue to be regulated. It was the Supreme Court case to decide whether the Second Amendment protects an individual right to keep and bear arms for self-defense or if the right was intended for state militias. The dissenting opinion explained that the Second Amendment did not guarantee individual gun ownership, only gun ownership by well-regulated militias, which today would correspond with something like the National Guard. But regardless of whether or not it's constitutional, is it common sense to allow easy access to guns at such a rate that so many Americans' lives are ended by them each day? With by far the most guns in the world per capita, America has more guns than people. Only Brazil beats the US for number of total gun deaths per year. Compared with other rich countries, America has 7 times as many gun homicides as the average. I won't take a deep dive into the arguments for and against gun regulation in this video, but I will ask this question. What can we do to reduce the misery and heartache caused by this particularly American invention? Now on a lighter note, known by some as the worst video game ever made, E.T. for the Atari 2600 is truly an imperfect invention. The purpose of the game was to guide E.T. through several levels to collect 3 parts for his interplanetary telephone so he could phone home. Due to an extended period of time needed to obtain the copyright, the game's creator only had 5 weeks to create the game before the 1982 Christmas season. It resulted in one of the worst commercial failures in video game history and was believed to be a contributing factor of the video game crash of 1983, which I didn't actually know was a thing until recently. The game was so bad that its creators decided to bury 728,000 leftover copies of it in a landfill in Alamogordo, New Mexico, and cover it with a layer of concrete. One can buy this game on eBay now for about $5. The gameplay was atrocious for this gem. To quote Wikipedia, the objective of this game is to collect 3 pieces of an interplanetary telephone. The pieces are found scattered throughout various pits. The player is provided with an on-screen energy bar which decreases when ET performs any actions such as moving, teleporting, or falling into a pit and levitating back to the top. To prevent this, ET can collect Reese's Pieces, which are used to restore his energy, or when 9 are collected, ET can call Elliot to obtain a piece of the telephone, or the player can save the candy pieces for bonus points at the end. After the 3 telephone pieces have been collected, the player must guide ET to an area where he can use the phone, which allows him to call his home planet. Once the call is made, a clock appears at the top right of the screen. ET has to arrive at the landing zone before it reaches 0. Once ET gets to the forest where his ship abandoned him and stands and waits in the designated area for the ship to come, the ship will appear on screen and take him back to his home planet. Then the game starts over, with the same difficulty level, while changing the location of the telephone pieces. The score obtained during the round is carried over to the next iteration. E.T. has 3 lives, and if he dies within those 3 lives, Elliot will come in and revive him. E.T. can get a 4th life if the player finds a geranium in one of the wells, or pits. According to the manual, the game ends, quote, when E.T. runs out of energy or when you decide to quit playing. I wonder which would usually come first. In 1983, the next year after E.T.'s release, Atari reported a loss of $536 million, and in 1984 the company was divided into two separate entities. Imperfect inventions can be very expensive. So the next imperfect invention we're going over is sugar, responsible for millions of cavities and millions of extra pounds on hips and stomachs across the planet. Sugar is a delicious but imperfect invention/discovery. Sugar is a generic name for any sweet-tasting soluble carbohydrate and can be divided into monosaccharides and disaccharides, of which sucrose, a disaccharide, is the most common white sugar that we put in coffee and sweets. Sugar has been implicated in various health calamities such as obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and tooth decay. Interestingly, scientists have trouble doing studies on sugar because they can't find a control group that does not consume sugar. And what fun would life be without sugar? Sugar is like tasting colors. Sugar was introduced to the Western world by Columbus, who was shown sugar cane by the natives, and immediately hundreds of sugar mills sprang up. The West has been hooked on the sweet stuff ever since. Demand for the product actually drove colonization and enslavement of some tropical areas of the Americas. World consumption of sugar went from about 2 pounds per person a year to about 90 pounds per person per year in the modern era. As with most things, America likes to go big, and the U.S. is now the highest per capita consumer of sugar. Big Sugar, or sugar corporations, are a real thing, and they spent over $1 million on lobbying in 2021. According to the Journal of American Medical Association, sugar refiners and manufacturers of sugary foods and drinks have sought to influence medical research and public health recommendations, with substantial and largely clandestine spending documented from the 1960s to 2016. The results of research on the health effects of sugary food and drink differ significantly depending on whether the researcher has financial ties to the food and drink industry. A 2013 medical review concluded that unhealthy commodity industries should have no role in the formation of national or international non-communicable disease policy. I agree with that. There have been similar efforts to steer coverage of sugar-related health information in popular media, including news media and social media. The FDA recommends that sugar be no more than 10% of your total dietary intake. Unlike something like cigarettes, where even one is bad for you, I think the takeaway for something like sugar is that it's okay in moderation. All this talk of sugar is making me think about the bag of Kit Kats in the fridge downstairs. So I gotta go. Thanks, everybody. Please like and subscribe.